Shri Ravi Shankar, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for giving me time and talking to me on Frankly Speaking. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I have been told that this is the most peaceful thing that I will do in all of 2013, to meet you and to interview you. And I know a lot of your followers are watching today. Is there anything you'd like to tell them at the start of this interview? To all your followers who are watching this all over.
I would say generally every citizen of this country should now volunteer to be citizens of a better world and better India. Volunteering for a better India means taking responsibility, to do whatever little bit they can do to make the country a better place.
Shri, my first question to you is that I find that of late you've withdrawn yourself from the political sphere. Why is that so?
I was never in the political sphere, for your information, I was always a social activist. I was doing anything that I could do in my capacity to make things better around me, things better in the society. But I was never associated myself with any particular party or party politics. Of course, national issues like corruption or female feticide, this is not just a political agenda. It's a matter of concern for the entire population. So we all have to be involved in that.
By political sphere, I meant issues which get entangled with politics. You've never been in any political party or supported anyone.
I know, but you cannot compartmentalize life. Life is, you have to take it in a holistic perspective. When politics interfere in religion, definitely the other way is also happening in the society. And politics is what? Matter that concern people. And of course, spiritual leaders or any common man has a responsibility to all the social problems. And
when in the middle of the Anna movement, when we spoke on 2 or 3 occasions,
correct,
every word of yours, every instruction of yours and every sentence of yours was being followed not just by your followers but by the political parties. And there was a fear that given the immense clout that someone like Shri Ravi Shankar has, he can also use that clout in the political sphere. You would not disagree that politicians were actually scared of you at that time?
But you know it better. I think politicians should be scared of doing wrong things in the society. They must. Scam after scam after scam, and still more scams are coming. I think somewhere the fear has gone. I wish they are afraid of people.
So you think that movement was good? What happened in a year and a half back?
But all these movements create awareness in people. They just wake them up from slumber, and that's the purpose of it. Even with this incident with that Nirbhaya case in Delhi, and people got angry, and I think it's good. It's good that anger evokes some activism in people, but that anger should be channeled in a proper, in a proper way, in a creative manner. Otherwise, it's going to burn our own finger.
On the anti-corruption movement, you think that Anna Hazare channeled it better? At that point of time, he channeled it well?
There are flaws in any of these movements. There are certain things that we can always improve on. And one thing with the movement is it at least created an awareness and brought voice to those who just take things as sab chalta hai attitude, But a lot need to be done. That's not enough. Just bringing about a law or a bill is not going to solve the problem of corruption in the country.
How did you get drawn into it? When this movement happened, how did you get drawn into it? Tell me about it.
A year before that, our volunteers, our youths in Delhi started on March 1st, 2009. Against terrorism and against corruption, our youth took a march, if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
A year later, then a few of the people came together and said, why not we form this IAC, India Against Corruption? And I was on the inauguration inaugurated the panel there in 2010. And then the movement took a
Did you tell
very
yourself?
good shape in 2000.
Did you tell yourself at any point of time, did anyone tell you that Sri, this is now going to get political, it will be seen to be anti-government? Was that a worry in your mind?
No, it was obvious. It was obvious. When you have to fight against an issue, it will definitely be an anti-government at that moment. But again, it's not against any particular one-party government. It's a government anywhere. Anyone there is an administrative lapse or there is corruption, whether it's in Karnataka or in Orissa or in Jharkhand or in say Bihar, issue is an issue, and when you have to stand up against it, you have to do it sincerely.
You are a different order of being. You're a highly spiritual person, but most normal people, Sri would say that I have so much at stake, I have so many followers, and I have a large organization, so it's not just me. And if I get on the wrong side of the government, then people worry about that. Did that fear not come to you or strike you, Sri?
No, in fact not, because I keep myself very clean inside and outside. Nothing to worry, Now that didn't bother me that, okay, something is going to happen to my organization. No, I'm not so attached to a particular organization. I feel the entire country is part of me and I am part of everybody. And every organization, I feel, should take some responsibility. And we are part of that, our civil society.
If I were to compare you to others, and that would be I'm afraid some of your followers will say I'm crossing the line or crossing the Rubicon. But my own assessment would be, Sri, that you are not as politically aggressive as someone like Baba Ramdev. Would you agree with my assessment?
No, that's correct. It's a correct observation. My nature is not agitation, it is more meditation. I inspire people to do something good for the society. But you see, there are different ways of working. Baba Ramdev works in a different way, and my cup of tea is much different. But every sincere citizen of this country would want something best for the people, something best for the nation. And in this run of doing something good, we may have to face some obstacles in between, and we are not afraid of it.
You get
criticism comes, people
you face criticism of that?
People.
What is the worst criticism that you faced when you got into this very active, again I will say political sphere, you will say public sphere? What is the worst criticism that you faced, something that perhaps hurt you?
No, I don't think any particular criticism did hurt me per se, but people without even knowing you, if someone knows you and criticizes you, it's a different issue. Yeah, you can accept it. Someone who doesn't even know you, they criticize, and I don't attach much value to that.
Shri, this is a question that you have been asked before. I wanted to ask you this as well. A fast as a method of protest is itself a controversial issue. And it is generally felt that a fast should be done for greater personal and spiritual enlightenment. I know you've been asked this before, but I want you to give me a more detailed answer today. Many people felt that fasts were being used for political blackmail, not for spiritual enlightenment, and hence the tool of the fast was perhaps being misused. Why did you, as a spiritually enlightened person, not speak out against it at that time?
I have always been saying fasting is not the solution. It could act as a pressure tactic for a short while, but not forever. I said we must protest, but protest without fast. I was for it. In fact, I was persuading Annaji to give up fast, but continue his agitation whenever he wanted to do that. I was the one who I always
Tell me about that. When did that happen? You remember the meeting when you told him this?
Every time I met with him, I said, please don't fast, because it's taking a big toll on his own life. Sometimes people call me the breakfast guru. So I go and break the fast of the people with Ramdevji or Anna. I said, fasting is not, it's not the language today that people would understand. In British time there was certain sensitivity, but today people say, if you are fasting, okay, you fast. We'll do our thing. No, creating mass awareness about an issue and getting people committed to work, committed for anti-corruption movement is more important.
On the other hand, there was a feeling that without that fast, you see, Shrishi, there was a level of brinkmanship. Anna staring at the government and the government staring back. That brinkmanship brought the Lokpal issue to the fore. That brinkmanship, along with this clear support that came from spiritual leaders like you, that brinkmanship actually, without that, there would have been no focus on the issue.
See, it happened even before in the Jantar Mantar issue. That is when the whole Lokpal bill was being even discussed, when people from both sides came together and formed a committee. But it took a climax in the August movement, when so many people joined about it. But then again and again, every 3 months, 6 months, if we start doing the fast again, it loses its, the weightage. And that's what has happened later on.
Why didn't you tell them to stop?
No, I have been telling.
Why didn't they listen to you?
That you have to ask them.
Are you happy with Anna joining, Arvind Kejriwal joining politics?
Here in this country, everybody has their free choice to do.
What is your view?
If he wants to start a political party, he has done it and it's okay.
Do you think the halo somewhere, the moral halo subsides the moment you get directly involved in politics?
For a spiritual leader, yes. Like a journalist, a spiritual leader should be very neutral. In a sense, if a journalist or a spiritual leader says, okay, you go and vote this person, this party, then you are somewhere taking away the free choice of the people. That's how one should not do it. You should only put the facts in front of them and allow people to have their own choice. Voting is making a choice. Same with the high commands in any bill that comes to Parliament. When high command gives a whip, you are undermining the intelligence or the thinking ability of the individuals. You are really making them like goats and sheep. That okay, I give a command, all of you walk this way. Each member of Parliament is selected by the population, and they should see what is good for their constituency, what is the voice of their population, not the voice of the high command.
That's a wonderful way of saying that what Arvind Kejriwal did was not appropriate. That is essentially what you are saying.
I am talking about the high command whip that happens in the Parliament. You see that the whip in high command some way takes away the free choice of voting for individual members of the Parliament. So if some bill comes, women's bill, and say, okay.
Are you talking about all parties or one party?
All parties.
Shishi, can I be more direct with you?
Yeah. Of course, this is a direct talk,
Are you anti-Congress?
Not at all.
Are you pro-BJP?
Not at all. Not at all. As of now, not. But I can't tell you what I will be in the coming future, the near future. But as of now, I am, as I said, I am non-partisan.
Were you aware when you were giving a speech, I'll share one moment with you, that in the middle of this whole agitation, you had flown down to Bangalore, and I forget the exact location where this speech was made by you, where everyone was assembled from the India Against Corruption movement. Were you aware when you were making the speech that all political parties, including the Congress and the BJP, were watching very closely to see which way you leaned?
That is their job. It's none of my business to say who is watching me, who is not watching me. They are most welcome to watch. I have nothing to hide. I have always been clear. When I take a step, I think twice and then I take my step. So there are people in Congress who are practicing art of living. That I don't want to polarize all good people into one party. We need a healthy opposition and a healthy ruling party. And our job is to create a healthy and happy society, a sane mindset and a prejudice-free intellect. And I'm on my job doing this.
So, if I can come back to where I started, I said that my view was that you've withdrawn yourself a little bit from the political sphere. Let's call it the public sphere. Is it likely, Shrishi, that you may play a more active role again in the future?
No, I will continue to play the role of a reformer. I will continue to inspire people to vote 100% when election comes. I will continue to ask people to remain, stay away from drugs and alcohol and female feticide, and encourage people to volunteer for a better India. This I'll continue to do.
But you won't endorse any party?
No, I mean it's not fair to endorse a party, because that's what I was saying. A religious leader endorsing a party means you are taking away the free choice of the individual. You only give them the facts. Look, vote for a good candidate. This, of course, I'm going to say. Vote for the honest one, not one with a criminal record.
What draws people to Shri Shri Ravi Shankar is the question that you may have been asked a zillion times by now.
Arnab, actually I don't know myself.
You must have analyzed it at some point of time.
I don't have time to sit and analyze why people come to me, what I should
do. Why do people have so much faith in you?
Perhaps I walk the talk. Because of that they know that I'm sincere. I walk the talk.
What do you mean by walk the talk?
Walk the talk means I don't keep something inside and something outside. Whatever I am, I'm like an open book. So people know that. Who have come close to me, come near me, they know me.
How do you handle so much attention? I was just standing outside and everybody here wants to look at you, have some time with you. I know I am probably a very envied object in this hotel where we are doing this interview today, because many people would want 30 seconds with you, a conversation with you, a question to you. They want their children named by you.
Well, there is so much love in people, and perhaps that gets a little kindled. And I don't see there is some very special thing about it. If you express love, and that comes back to you many folds. And all I know is that sense of belongingness with everybody.
Shrishi, I have often wondered, reading about you and meeting you and having the opportunity of speaking to you, whether a person like you and your movement can become a threat to traditional religion. And I see this quote, you were asked this question about your relationship with religion. And you said that people want to do something authentic, explaining why so many people come to the art of living. People want to do something authentic based not just on belief but on the experiential system. Please explain that to me.
Yeah, one is intellectually understanding, other is feeling from within, feeling that in yourself. You hear about Atma, Paramatma, you hear about God and all that thing, but unless you feel that peace, the calmness, the love within yourself, this just remains a concept in the head. This is where I say spirituality and religion are little different. Religion gives you concept, rituals, but spirituality gives you that experience, makes you feel that oneness deep within and with people around you.
So aren't you a challenge? Aren't you yourself then a threat to standard forms of religion?
Yeah, there are people with prejudice are now almost in every field, and they are threat to society and the freedom in society. I personally don't feel that someone is a threat to me or someone is my enemy. To me, only prejudice exists here and there, and I have been walking in between the prejudice world.
Now, have you felt anywhere, because you attend several conferences, meet several religious leaders, has this conversation ever come up that Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, the form of spirituality which you practice, can take away someone from a religion, and for example a Hindu, a Buddhist, a Muslim, a Christian can be drawn more towards you than to their own, than to the religion that they were born in or the religion they profess?
This type of concerns or fear or unfounded paranoia exists, prejudice exists in the world, many places. I tell you, when I was in Iraq, I was in Karbala, in the Karbala University. When I went, the Vice Chancellor met with me. He said, "You are teaching computer class to our people, that's okay, you can do that. But don't take away the anger from them."
Don't take away the
anger from them.
Anger from them.
I said, don't teach them meditation and this brings down their anger. Don't do that. They need the anger to have tit for tat with the Americans. So there was a concern in that gentleman. He was from a Pakistani origin. He was the Vice Chancellor in Karbala University. There is a concern that whether it will take away your activism or anger when you meditate, when you become calm, happy and content within you. It takes a lot of effort to convince them that, see, it's not taking you away from your religion or from your activism, but it only gives you more alertness, more sense of communication. This communication becomes better, sense of calmness within you, which is most needed for people. It took some time for me to convince these people, and there are many such people who have prejudice against any spiritual guru. Somewhere out there they are not normal, sort of they must be cheating you or fraud. Without even defining what is fraud, people say you are fraud. This is what I am saying. This sort of prejudice in the society is very dangerous. In some way, spirituality or say even religion keeps people away from drugs, alcohol, depression and all these menace in society, in the modern society. It keeps them away from this. And violence, violent tendencies, broken families. You see, so many social issues arise when they lose or when they don't get in touch with that inner core of what we call spirituality or the inner calmness.
Your teachings are very simple. Your words, the way you express them, are very, very simple. Even I have not practiced it. Maybe I'm not physically fit for it, but the Sudarshan Kriya. And I have been reading about how people have been coming to all over in America, and they do, Soham. They have your tape saying Soham, and the Sudarshan Kriya.
It's just one of the technique. Many yoga,
but it's very simple.
Very simple.
It's very simple. Now spirituality is supposed to be complex, isn't it?
No. I've kept it so simple. Also, kept many of these techniques so secular that people from any religious background or faith background can adopt and feel the benefits of it. See, our vision is to have a violence-free world, violence-free society. That's what I have been dreaming from a long time. And in pockets, of course, it's happening. People are moving away from violent tendencies there. But there is a long way to go in the world.
Do you feel that you have a spiritual radiance? Let me put it very directly. There are people who say that there is a form of, there is a radiation in your presence. And
radiation is very dangerous or not?
No, you see...
People try to protect themselves from radiation.
No, why I meant it, because a lot of your followers, there are some followers who see a certain divinity in your presence. I'd like to quote one of them and get your reaction to it. This is Truman State University professor and Shankar follower Lloyd Pfluger, who says, I feel Sri Sri has a very strong radiation. It's not constant, it's like a peacock. It's not all the time when a peacock spreads his feathers, but when he does it, you can't ignore it. I have been around Sri Sri when the feathers are spread in various degrees, and there are times when I felt I would physically melt from the spiritual radiation I was feeling from him. Why would he feel that way?
You know, if you're a student of physics, you know everything is vibration. You meet somebody and you feel like talking to them. You meet someone else, you try to avoid them. You know, many people try to avoid her knob because they're scared what she's going to ask. You know, many people are so enthusiastic to listen to her now. So there is a certain vibration we all emit. Every individual has that vibrational component to him.
Yeah.
So the whole universe is just a wave function, and it's for the person to feel. You know, some people feel the love and compassion. Some people feel whatever feeling they get. So the feelings get triggered by anything, you know. If you are a clear mind, a baby is good enough for you to invoke the joy and happiness within you.
You're simplifying it. However, the one thing that I have found, I'm a student of sociology. Sri studied sociology in college and later in university. And I feel that people respond to you in a different way from other spiritual leaders. The one thing which I find constant among most people who speak to me about you is that they feel personally mesmerized by you in your presence, and I want to understand how that happens. Many rationalists have explained these things in different ways. You know, let me quote another person, and these are not people who are, these are university professors and people of a strong scientific temper. Nancy De Silveiro, quoted in another article, says, there was a moment when he just locked in, looked me in the eye and stopped. And I went into that classic description of pure bliss, pure peace, just everything was right. It happens because he's established in being and he runs around in unbounded time-space. In his presence, if you let go, that's available. Explain this, what she's describing, some people are saying is transmission or Shaktipat, a long-standing phenomenon which happens between gurus and their disciples. I want you to explain it to me. What was happening to her?
I know experiences cannot be explained. It can only be experienced. It can only be felt. So many people get these experiences, and I would usually recommend them, don't get attached to the experiences. Many good experiences may happen. Whether it's in meeting or in meditation, you may get different experiences. You may feel some fragrance, you may feel this and that. But what is most important is to see the experiencer, the seer beyond the scenery, the experiencer which is beyond the experience. You know, when you see that we are all made up of one consciousness, one light, one being, and when we put our attention there, that's when you get that enormous strength and compassion, sense of belongingness with everybody around you. So this is an inner phenomenon, internal happening that happens. So why someone feels happiness, why someone feels compassion, why tears come in someone else's eyes, there is no explanation for it. If you see in our Shastra, it says when the granthis open, the nadis in the body open, then some of these experiences do come, tears do come, you feel a lot of joy, happiness come. In the Yoga Shastra, some of these are said, but in spite of that, there is no concrete explanation that can be given about these phenomena.
You don't see yourself as a healer.
No, I see myself as a child who refuses to grow up. Healing does happen. Wherever there is love, healing happens. It depends on the receiver.
I want to talk a little bit about you and your experiences. If you choose to, of course. If you choose not to speak to me about it, that is also fine, but I will ask you.
Yeah, I'll speak. Tell me what you want.
I want to know about your very early years, and I have read that when you were 4-year-old, you recited passage from the Bhagavad Gita, a book that you had never read.
Correct.
What is your memory of that, and why do you think that happened, and how do you explain that?
Arnab, there are many child prodigies today. There are boys 4-year, 5-year-old, they can play violin, they can play classical Carnatic music in flute, in veena. This is a phenomenon, you know.
To read the Bhagavad Gita, to recite the Bhagavad Gita, which you've never read.
It just started coming to me automatically that time. I myself don't know how it came to me. But I think it's an old sanskara from the past.
What do you mean by sanskara?
Sanskara means an impression in the consciousness. See, our consciousness is very ancient. If you study physics, you know that a consciousness is older than or more powerful than the matter around you. So the consciousness gets in all these imprints in it, the memory in it. So it could be one such, just like many child prodigies today in the world. I could recite Bhagavad Gita, but that's not any big deal about it. There's no big deal about it.
Where you went into a 10-day period of silence in 1982.
Correct.
After which you came out with the Sudarshan Kriya.
Correct.
You must have been in early 20s or mid-20s at that point of time.
Early 20s.
Tell me about that period that you went into the 10-day silence. What happened before that? What happened after that? From what you remember?
As a child, I was always more interested in philosophical and spiritual things. I was not very comfortable playing with my age group. I tried myself hard to play with them, cricket, and the very big fancy in those days were cricket. Everybody would get together and talk about cricket, and I had no interest. I'll come and talk about a bowler as a batsman and batsman as a bowler, trying to put myself in my nose, and I would always feel that I was out of place, But I spent my time with elderly people, and one such gentleman was Sudhakar Chaturvedi, who was Mahatma Gandhi's very close associate. He taught Mahatma Gandhi Bhagavad Gita when he came back from South Africa. He's still alive, I tell you. He's 119-year-old gentleman. And sitting with him, listening to his days with Mahatma Gandhi and stories, and also my father and my mother, all this environment that created a very spiritual and intellectually intriguing, and he was an Arya Samaji, by the way. So Arya Samaj, it's very intellectual and logical. That logical mindset I got from these influences. And then later when I was 20, I took 10 days of silence. I wanted to do something to society, I want to give something back to the society. And this thought was always there. The whole world is part of my family. I'm going to go everywhere. So the 10 days of silence, like a poem, it started teaching what I'm doing now. I didn't intellectually think and design a course, okay, I'm going to do a course like that. but it was a spontaneous outflow.
And after that, when you came out of it, did you find yourself a changed person?
You know, I wouldn't say that I have a changed person, no. But what I was teaching was changing everybody around.
Shrishi, now I'm told that another Shakti Kriya is something that you're going to come out with in 2013.
I've already started.
You've already started teaching it.
See, our body is like atomic reactor. What happens is an atom goes in a big speed within the generator, it generates enormous amount of energy. Similarly, our consciousness can generate a lot of energy in our body, the dormant energy in the body.
How do you push yourself? I asked some people around you about your daily routine. You travel 150 days a year, I'm told. Almost every second day you are traveling. The people are around you. Is it true that you sleep 2 or 3 hours a day?
About 3 hours. It's not that I have any sleeping problem. I do sometimes if I wish I can sleep longer too.
Why are you pushing yourself so much? Why don't you, and I'm sorry to sound, I am sure that many of your followers will tell me that I'm crossing the line many times, but I would like to
No.
Why doesn't Shri Ravi Shankar relax a little bit? Take it easy. Why is he pushing himself so much?
You know, if you see a good movie, you just take up the phone and call all your friends, say this is a wonderful movie, you should go and see. You know, not that the producer, nor the director and someone is paying you to make that call, and you know, you're not giving an advertisement. Why you do it? It's because you find some joy and you want to share it. The nature of joy is to share. And you don't find it's a burden doing what you are doing if you love what you are doing.
Shri, how important is influence for you? You've been described as one of the most influential and powerful people in India, in Asia, and sometimes in the world. How important is influence and power to you?
To me, there is only one power that rules the entire universe. And influences don't stay too long. What I always tell people is that, you know, abhav aur prabhav mein nahi rehna, swabhav mein rehna. Apne swabhav mein tike rehna. You know, not being the influence of something. You know, today people are influencing of alcohol more than anything else. I am not as influential as the alcohol, I suppose. Not in the influence of something, but make use of your intellect. Make use of the logic that nature has put in you, God has given you. Make use of common sense, you know. I emphasize all the time on that.
There is a view that major spiritual leaders, having got huge followings, want to use their influence.
They should be responsible.
No,
they should be responsible. They should not take away the free choice of people.
I take your point, but you see that at some point of time the urge comes in you to make a difference towards the nation, and that is where you get enmeshed into areas which politicians said, no, this is my area. Let me give you one example, Shrishi. You wanted to have your influence in changing the direction of the fight against Maoist terror or Naxalism. You offered to, and the government did not respond. Why did the government not respond? Question number one. Why did you offer? Question number two. Do you think you were getting into a political sphere, as I would define it? That's question number three. That's one example.
You know, I do offer wherever I can be of any help. Some places my offer has been accepted and used, like for an Ulfa terrorist. There were 350 Ulfa terrorists came to Bangalore Ashram, stayed for a month. They went through the transformational change, and it was so heartwarming. Each one of their life is a story by itself. And some other places, of course, the so-called powerful people in the country, they didn't want to take any help. They thought they can do it all by themselves.
Why did they feel that way?
That you have to ask them.
Well, they say, when I ask them, they say that sages and spiritual leaders should not involve themselves in worldly political matters.
I think they are mistaken. In the world, the reformers and the rulers should work together in many areas. You know, people who are working the social field and spiritual field, they should be consulted and they should be taken into confidence when they take certain issues of national importance. They should not have an untouchable behavior towards any spiritual, any field for that matter. This is a problem in our country, you know. Some people come to you with open mind, want suggestions and ideas and how you can help them to cooperate and solve issues. Some other people think it's their only special category and they alienate everybody else and they get into deeper mess.
Why did Sri Sri Ravi Shankar not speak? Now here are a few rapid fire questions. Why did Sri Sri Ravi Shankar not speak on earlier issues? When I was in college, I experienced the Mandal Commission agitation. Then after that, there was the Babri Masjid demolition. There was this whole Ram Janmabhoomi controversy that happened.
Correct.
At that time also, you were a person of great influence
I
in
know
the
I
early
have
90s.
spoken on each of these issues all the time. But
When it
then
happened?
those days there was no Times Now. There was no, so many channels or television were not available in those days. But I have always spoken, if you go into the archives, any major issue in this country, I have not left it untouched.
So it would be wrong to say that now you're going to, some politicians are actually very, very comfortable right now with the thought that Sri Sri Ravi Shankar will take 3 steps back and never speak on a political subject. Your message to them?
I would like them to keep guessing for now.
How does it feel to have the influence that you command? When you spoke from your retreat, I think in Germany, at the time of the the anti-corruption agitation, everybody was weighing every word of yours. Do you choose your words carefully? Are you politically correct?
I just speak my heart. I don't try to see whether I am politically correct or not. What comes to my heart, I just say it. Sometimes it goes well with the people, sometimes it doesn't go well with them. You know, once I spoke about the school issue. I said some schools should be, some of the schools are better run by the private institution than the government schools. You know, because some areas in Jharkhand and Bihar and the government schools are not running very well. And then immediately everybody pounced on that one thing, taking it out of context. Actually I said, private institutions take personal interest in the students in many of these areas which is affected by the Naxal movement in the country. So they said, oh, Guruji is against all government schools. I have never ever said. My mother herself studied in a government school. So sometimes people overreact to things.
Well, potentially so, yes. Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, this India Against Corruption movement which you started, do you believe it is over now?
No.
In the form that you started?
I don't think so. I know any movement has some ups and downs. The ups and downs.
Do you meet Anna Hazare?
Yeah, I know him from past 30 years.
Do you meet him now?
I keep meeting him now and then in different occasions.
Last question. You say that these movements go through ups and downs through different phases. We've seen the ups in the past. How do you predict things panning out in 2013? Scams are not over. We've just seen one big scam on Armsgate and the Choppergate just having broken out a few weeks back. How do you see things panning out in 2013?
You know, people are fed up with the scams. We are caught between slum and the scam in the country. And I feel that the country will wake up and take responsibility. Again, when you see in the slums, people are not even aware, they don't have any education. They don't know what's happening. A few people watch television, many others, they watch television only for entertainment. They don't know what's happening in the country. They only know the prices are rising. They are affected by it. And alcohol is another big problem. During election, money and alcohol flows in all these areas. A lot of reform need to be done in this country. That's why I started this Volunteer for a Better India. People take responsibility, go into the areas where nobody goes and help people to,
Will you, Anna Hazare and Baba Ramdev ever share a common platform?
Time to time we have shared the
No,
platform.
will you share a common platform? Because you see that happening.
I don't know yet. I'll have to think about it. Yeah, because our working style is very different. But the goal is same to have a corruption-free country. That's no doubt.
It will be very interesting if you come together. Thank you very much, Shri Ravi Shankar. Thank you for talking to me. Thank you.